The United States has arrested two Chinese researchers on national security related charges. Yun Xinjiang and Cheng Xuanhan are being held in federal custody and facing up to 20 years imprisonment for smuggling in materials that they use for research. But what's really going on? Are these researchers agro-terrorists endangering US security? Or are they the targets of an academic witch hunt in a rising Cold War against China? Welcome to the China Report, made in collaboration with Pivot to Peace. Every week, we will be helping you sort through all the propaganda with an independent view of the country we are taught to hate but know so little about. I'm your host, KJ No. These are this week's headlines. Peace activists protest the spurious arrest of Chinese researchers at the University of Michigan. On July 31st, peace activists held a protest calling for the University of Michigan to defend Chinese scientists who had been arrested on federal charges of smuggling for bringing in research materials into the US without permits. Members of Code Pink, a women-led peace organization, hand-delivered a petition with 2,000 signatures to the university's administration. Organizer Linda Wan, a University of Michigan alumni and Code Pink member, said the federal charges were trumped up and hoped the university would make a stand for justice to counter the rising xenophobia targeting China. We will be talking to Linda Wan later in this show. Seoul signals shift of U.S. forces Korea role in Korean Peninsula. South Korea and the United States may discuss the expansion of United States forces Korea role in the Korean Peninsula to expand it to wage war in the Pacific against China, according to a ranking Korean official. This could implicate and involve South Korean troops in the war. Retired Lieutenant General pointed out, if a limited conflict were to break out, Korea would be inevitably involved to some degree. He also pointed out that the United States could fly combat sorties into Beijing. Korea has always sent troops to U.S. wars, including 320,000 soldiers to the Vietnam War. And after 1972, South Korean troops outnumbered U.S. troops 2-1. Japan-US discussing scenario for nuclear weapons use in a war with China. Tokyo and Washington have strategized and held multiple war games where the United States would use nuclear weapons in East Asia against China, according to Kyodo News. They also reviewed how to manage the public relations fallout from nuclear use. The US frames this as discussions over extended deterrence. However, all policy papers regarding the matter signaled that the US would be the first mover in a nuclear war engaging in a nuclear strike. China has no first strike policy in nuclear war. China is choking off critical minerals to Western defense companies. According to the Wall Street Journal, China is choking off supply of critical minerals to Western defense companies. According to one Western company quoted in the Wall Street Journal, the company claims that requests for imported magnets have been recently approved for many civilian purposes, but rejected or delayed for defense and aerospace. Due to this supply shortage, industry traders, according to the Wall Street Journal, say that certain materials needed by the defense industry now go for 5 or more times than what was typical before China's recent restrictions. One company said it was offered samarium, an element needed to make magnets that can withstand the extreme temperatures of a jet fighter engine, for 60 times the standard price. Taiwan DPP party loses recall vote. Taiwan province's ruling party, the DPP, recently lost in its recall attempt of opposition KMT lawmakers. Similar to South Korea's previously ruling PPP party, with which it is politically aligned, the DPP found itself with the opposition party controlling the legislature. Both ruling governments, instead of negotiating and finding common ground with the opposition, as normal democratic governments do, took drastic measures instead. In South Korea, they attempted a military coup, one that seems to have been communicated and coordinated with Taiwan Island. On Taiwan Island, they attempted a massive recall, a legislative coup by any other name, in order to nullify the opposition legislature. This attempted mass recall, an unprecedented action in a democratic state, was based on the cynical calculation that it is much easier to recall a political seat than to actually win the seat. However, all 24 recalls were rejected, dashing the DPP's plans. Votes opposing the recall were higher in some jurisdictions than the votes that originally put the candidate in power. Peace activists protest the arrest of Chinese researchers at the University of Michigan. The US recently arrested 2 Chinese researchers on national security-related charges. Yun Xinjiang and Cheng Han are being held in federal custody and facing up to 20 years imprisonment for smuggling research materials into the United States. But are these researchers really agro-terrorists posing a serious threat to US security? Or are they the targets of academic terrorism in a rising Cold War against China? We're here with Linda Wan of Code Pink, Bob McMurray, and Julie Tang to discuss what's really happening here. So welcome, Bob, Linda, and Julie.
Thanks for having us, KJ.
Good to be here, KJ.
Hi,
Thank you so
KJ,
much.
everybody. So nice to see you.
Thank you for joining us. Linda, I'd like to start off with you. You have been present on the ground. Can you tell us, and you were also one of the people who organized this protest, what is this case about? Who are these individuals and what is happening?
Okay. So I live in Ann Arbor, Michigan, home to the University of Michigan. And today we have 2 U of M postdoc fellows from China, as you said, being held in federal detention without bond, facing 20 years in prison for agro-terrorism. Just to recap the case, Yongjing Chen was arrested at Detroit International Airport on June 2nd for carrying samples of plant fungus that she researches. She's been in the US for 2 years already, working at the University of Michigan, and she's published a dozen peer-reviewed articles on this subject and is in fact, respected for her work on mitigating this fungus. Yes. And then separately, Cheng Han, she was arrested for mailing samples of roundworms from China to the US. Roundworms are a non-hazardous biological material that you can find in everyday garden soil. So, nothing is unusual about what these 2 scholars did. KJ, as you noted on an earlier China report, it's widely known in the scientific community that the bureaucracy and the paperwork in the US is just such an ordeal that scientists will routinely find workarounds. And we suspect this is what these 2 scholars did. Typically, the penalty is a reprimand or a fine, but instead our Department of Justice is inflaming the situation to fearmonger about China, and it's just terrible. So Right. So at this time, American biologists and agronomists are refuting the non-scientific claims of the Department of Justice. I spoke with a friend of mine who's a U of M graduate student in the Department of Geology, and she supports what you said about the common practice of finding workarounds. Caitlin Allen, who's a professor emeritus from the University of Wisconsin-Madison, says that Fusarium graminearum, the name of the plant fungus, is not on any list of dangerous plant pathogens and has never been seen as an agro-terrorist agent. And then one scientist interviewed in another article just said that these charges are asinine. So this is where we are right now.
So once again, this plant fungus, Fusarium graminearum, is highly prevalent in the United States already. And if I understand, or, as you said, that Xinjiang is actually doing research to try and prevent damage
Yes.
by this fungus to U.S. crops. So she's actually doing doing important work to prevent food blight in the United States. Is that correct?
Exactly. But in this upside down world, they're charging them with agro-terrorism.
I'd like to come to you, Julie. The charges that have been levied are conspiracy to commit offense or to defraud the United States, smuggling goods into the United States, false statements, visa fraud. And of course, this has also been framed in the larger context as explicit statements around agro-terrorism. Julie, is it normal for individuals to be prosecuted and held without bond at this level for what look like process crimes? Why do you think, what's happening here, and why do you think it's happening?
You're right, KJ and Linda. The charges are extremely unusual, and the gravamen of the case is that they're smuggling in a pathogen that is of the gravest national security concern, and that this pathogen is a potential agro-terrorism weapon. That's the gravamen of the offense. Everything else, the conspiracy, the visa fraud, um, whatever that they throw in the complaint, are just what we call add-ons. These add-ons facilitate plea bargaining, and the prosecutor usually will advise the defendant, if you plead to the main charge, we'll drop all these charges, knowing that these charges are probably very minor, and even if convicted, they will not necessitate very heavy punishment or penalty. So by putting a whole lot of stuff into it, it's buffering up the charges, making it more serious than what it is, and making people forget what the main charge is and what are the evidence required to prove it. First of all, in a case like this, I understand the defendant is John, and the co-defendant has left for China. Correct me if I'm wrong. He was stopped at the border, and they stopped him, they detained him, they searched him, they looked through his email, his phone, and they interrogated him, and they released him. And I understand he is now in China. So the only one standing charge is Jan, and she's the one left holding the bag because she is in the research in her office doing research while all this is happening. She was an afterthought when it comes to research and arrest. And again, correct me if the facts are not, exactly, because I'm only relying on what I read from the media. It is really unfortunate that these charges are being brought under these circumstances, because this is a classic case of overcharging. And as it was stated by you and by Linda, that the plant pathology experts are all saying the same thing, which is different from what the U.S. Department of, what the prosecutors are saying. That first of all, the U.S. Department of Agriculture keeps a list of potential agro-terrorism agents. And this particular agent, Fusarium Graminium is not on that list. So for the federal prosecutors to classify it on his own based on what he considered is scientific literature, it is really bogus. And this sample is also very well known to the scientists in this country. It has been around for 125 years. Breakout of this particular infection related to this fungus has already naturally occurred in dozens of US states, in the states that produce wheat and barley for at least 125 years. And if in fact this is brought in under these circumstances, there has absolutely zero harm or any harm that could not be dealt with by US crop experts and scientists. See, these experts are actually countering everything that the prosecutor is saying, that the experts believe that they have the tools to manage it if there is any risk involved. But they also added that says that this is not something that just got imported from China and people should not be freaking out. This is a direct quote from one of the experts. Now, the prosecutor in this case carried the burden of proof beyond a reasonable doubt. And in America, anyone charged with a crime is considered to be innocent until proven guilty. In court, we advise the jurors that this defendant standing before you is innocent, and he's innocent until the prosecution proves the elements of his crime, every single element of his crime, beyond a reasonable doubt. Beyond reasonable doubt is the highest standard in criminal law, that it requires not just a belief that this person is guilty or a speculation that something happened and he must be guilty, but it has to be a strong, committed, moral conscience decision wherein there is no more reason for you to doubt. And if there's anything within the evidence that will give you a doubt that is based on reason, you must find him not guilty. This is the standard of proof that the prosecution must bring into court to prove Ms. John guilty of the crimes of conspiracy to bring in pathogens that are of the gravest national security concern and that they are potential agro-terrorism weapons. The prosecution will fail to prove this because the evidence just do not support it. It's going to come down to the experts to inform the court and inform the jury what they believe this pathogen means and what the kind of risk of harm would be. And then you have the evidence also. Now, the conspiracy theory relies on two persons who made an agreement with the intent to commit a crime. Conspiracy is a specific intent crime. You have to have the intent to commit the crime. You have the knowledge of the agreement to do so. And based on what I read so far, I think this is going to be an uphill battle. And to throw in all the charges, as you said, KJ, is really a smokescreen. And this is what I think is happening. And that is, it is that Ms. John is being tried by the court of public opinion and not by the court of law. That's why you don't see a whole lot of stuff, information on this, because it's a very, very weak case. And if you look at the background of this case and put it in a larger framework, and that is the China Initiative, in which a group of scientists have been investigated, and some of them have been charged with crimes, and the result of the conviction is so dismal. And this China Initiative is started in the first Trump administration. Trump administration by the FBI department, and they did it as a like a wholesale roundup of Chinese scientists, deeming that any of the Chinese scientists working in the United States that have ever had anything to do with China, regardless of the depth of the quality or the quantity of their relationship with Chinese universities, they are all suspects and they are all under investigation. Hundreds of Chinese scientists were investigated. And when you knew that you're under investigation, it's the scariest thing in the world. And for those few that were charged with a crime, their life had been completely ruined. And the result of this huge, humongous effort to round up these Chinese scientists, prosecute them under very nefarious circumstances. You know the percentage of conviction that they got is only 25%, a very paltry number when you look at the overall conviction that the DOJ gets, and they get 91% convictions when they prosecute. They're serious and they have the evidence. But in this case, they're like drifting away from the purpose of real prosecution of crimes and getting into another agenda, which is completely in opposite to the purpose and goals of law enforcement. And I think in this case, it is part of the China bashing agenda, the pushing to war with China, the consensus driving by painting this group of scientists as spy agents for China, how dangerous China is, and how threatening China is now to the United States. So we'll continue our Cold War with the consensus from the people, from the American people who hear this information, got affected by the information, the little things that they throw at them, that this is agro-terrorism. Wow, scientists are committing terrorist acts in America. They are bringing in pathogens that would destroy our crops, hurt our economy. And all these things, once the experts have a hand to talk about this, all just kind of like fizzled out. Just like the 75% of the cases that they have brought to court under the China Initiative, under the Trump administration.
Yes, absolutely. So it sounds like there is a really concerted effort to manufacture consent. And would you say that it's fair to characterize this as a academic or political witch hunt?
Oh, absolutely. No question in my mind. It just, and this is not the first time that the American DOJ departments or the FBI departments are doing that. You look back in the 1950s, the most famous case is Chen Shenzhen. I'm not pronouncing it very accurately. It's Mandarin, but he is the leading scientist back in the 50s on aerodynamics. He was brilliant. He was innovative. He was very productive. Unfortunately, he was branded as a spy under the atmosphere of xenophobia, racism, and Red Scare, and he was deported back to China after several years of house arrest. But in 1955, his family was put on a ship, sent back to China, deported. It is unfortunate, that we keep doing self-destructive things in this country. We target innocent people, brand them as spies for China, just so that they have meet the big agenda of confronting China. And back then, and in this case, is a Cold War with China over trade, over whatever that they have issues with. It is hurting our own citizen and also hurting world peace. It is most unfortunate.
Absolutely, Julie. And I also want to point out that John, in the court docket was written in a way to suggest that there was nefarious intent because John was revealed to be a CPC member and that her work was funded by the government. But I think that it's important to point out that most Chinese students are invited to join the party, a little bit like the way that good students in the US would join Phi Beta Kappa. It's a kind of a signal of accomplishment and honor. And also the allegation that her work was funded by the government. The Chinese have a public university system, so almost any scholarship or research would be funded by the government. So I think it's important to highlight this kind of background, which is put forth as signaling nefarious intent when it's actually a very normal situation. But I wanted to come to Bob. Bob, you are a University of Michigan alumnus and a longtime local. You were at the press conference and you spoke out. why did you feel the need to come out and speak? And what did you say at the press conference?
Oh, thanks for having us, KJ. Uh, I felt compelled to speak because I'm very much alarmed by uh, what I see as a repeating pattern of building up for another Cold War with China, and in the same way that we built up the Cold War with the Soviet Union, the same way that we've built up the animosity towards Russia at the moment, the animosity towards Iran at the moment. Um, this is a pattern that we've all seen. It's very familiar, and it's filled with lies. But it's insidious. It's demonizing China and dehumanizing Chinese people. When I see the pictures of these two young researchers in the mass media portrayed in the way that they're portrayed in the mass media, and just having that word agro-terrorism attached to their faces, that's very alarming to me because I recognize this pattern. It's a pattern of, again, demonizing a country and preparing us for war. And especially when it's associated and it's in our backyard. We live in Michigan. This young woman, these women are being detained in Michigan. Um, and and for the University of Michigan to not rise to their defense is another indictment of their behavior in the same pattern in terms of how they've responded to the encampments about Gaza. They've compromised their moral integrity, and I feel like the community, the surrounding community of Ann Arbor and the University of Michigan and the people of Michigan need to stand forward and say, what's happening here is wrong and dangerous at so many levels. And it's incredibly important to push back and help this university find its moral center again. That's why it's just alarming to me because we're talking about the sacrifice of our men and women who want to serve their country. But if we go to war with China, they're not going to be serving our country. They're going to be serving the narrative of power and wealth in this country. And I don't want to see that happening again.
Absolutely, Bob. And you mentioned the faces of the researchers. I actually looked at a mugshot of one of the researchers, and of course she looks, very, scholarly and gentle. She certainly doesn't have the demeanor of a terrorist. But the thing that struck me was the utter bewilderment in her eyes that she's
Yes.
somebody who's, working hard, trying to improve science and trying to support or help, science in the United States. And the sheer shock was what came across to me in her image.
I had the same response, KJ, and that's just on a very human level. I was heartbroken to see this young woman framed up in the way that she was. It truly is heartbreaking.
Yeah, in this
Yes.
wholesale prosecution of Chinese scientists, we forgot that they are individuals. They have families, they have parents, they have children, and their lives have been totally destroyed by this wholesale stereotyping, branding of them as a group to be spies. And then this is all done to fit the larger propaganda framework that helps to pit China against U.S. and to create enemies from China. And I'm just really sad to see how these scientists who spend years and years, building up to where they are, like you said, trying to get contracts, grants, doing diligent researchers, scientists in dietitian area, in all kinds of areas are being prosecuted, and now on this fungus research, it is really a tragedy. I think what is happening to the Chinese American community as a whole, and to the Asian American community in general.
Linda, you were the person who initiated or organized this protest. And when this case first happened, you reached out to Cheng Xuan, who is one of the accused. And you wrote in a letter, we want to do anything we can to reach out to you and help you during this difficult time. I hope the facility allows you time outdoors for fresh air and some exercise. If you have a chance to look up at the beautiful sky, I hope you'll be reminded that it covers and protects everyone. There is room in this world for everyone. Those are moving statements to send to somebody that you don't know. So I wanted to get a sense of, why you started this action and why you care and why other people should care about this.
Mm. Yeah, well, I give credit to Code Pink, which is a women's-led peace group to which I belong. I've been working with them for several years right now. They're a group that advocates dialogue, peace, and understanding amongst the nations. And at this moment, we are particularly concerned about rising tensions against China. So, yeah, this case came to my attention in a meeting, with my Code Pink colleagues. Yeah, so it's very. We've been very, very conscious of the fact that, as Bob says, we are. This is a playbook we've seen before. The manufacturing consent for war, making false enemies, priming the American people to hate and go to war, and we just seen it too many times in my adult life, and it's got to end. I think I'm particularly moved by this case because I'm a first generation Chinese American, and it just breaks my heart to see China. This should be a moment for cooperation. China's return to the world stage is a very good thing, I think, for peace and progress. And instead, our insane leaders are responding to it with fear. And these two young women scientists, are being framed, and I feel for them personally too. So that's my interest in the case.
Yeah. And Bob, did you want to say something?
Oh no, I was just looking at the picture that you just had on the screen, and that was the look of bewilderment and just disappointment. You can see it in our eyes that it's just like, what the hell is going on here? I'm here to help your farmers. I'm here to help your country. I'm doing research that's valuable to all of us, and now I'm being charged with with this.
Yeah,
It's mind-boggling.
it is. It is fine.
I just wanted to say thank you to Linda for initiating a letter to John. It reminds me of another female scientist who committed suicide under similar circumstances, and that's Jane Wu. She was under investigation, and she could not handle the pressure. She finally took her own life. And I hope that what you did in that letter that you wrote and the support that you're giving her, and I hope Jan understands knows what's happening, would have the strength and resilience to fight for her own fairness and justice actually for the entire Chinese American scientific community, as well as for the Chinese American community.
Yes. And, we've discussed Jane Wu on this show previously, but she was never charged with anything. She was simply put under investigation. The fact that she was under investigation was enough for the university to shut down her studio. And then the university actually put her under psychiatric hold and, forced her into a psychiatric facility. Because obviously she was depressed and upset with the unfair way she had been treated. And then not long after release, she committed suicide. And I absolutely agree that if, somebody like Linda had reached out to Jane Wu, perhaps the outcome might have been different. But I do think it's important to point out that these charges, if they stick, could be devastating to the researchers. They're facing 20 years. And I think it's also important to know that these women are probably the only children of their families. So that's 20 years that they will spend, up to 20 years that they could spend in prison. And I think it sends the message that to Chinese people and to people all over the world that the United States is not a safe place. That the United States is certainly not a safe place for Chinese students and Chinese researchers, especially young women. And I think that this is, a little bit like a form of academic terror. It really puts fear into the hearts of Asians and Chinese uh, in the United States and all over. So I just want to come back to, the larger implications. Linda, what do you see as the implications for China-US relations, for science in general, from this case?
Wow. Boy, I don't have a crystal ball, but I just see it as incredibly disappointing for human progress. If this feels like we're going backwards in time to the 1950s, the McCarthyite, anti-communist fear-mongering, it's just insane. Yeah, it's incredibly disappointing and sad. Yeah, and I guess that's all I
Yes.
can offer right now. Yeah, and we have to do whatever we can to push back.
Yes. So, Linda, what are some things you think that people could do? And I'll get to you, Bob, as well.
What is it? Well, all I know is here in Ann Arbor at the University of Michigan, we made contact with quite a few student organizations concerned about this issue. And we definitely want to stay connected with them. School will start in the fall, and we're talking about having some programs on campus, just highlighting this issue. Yeah, we don't want to, we want to keep this issue in the spotlight, especially with the students returning. And and just raising just general awareness about the Cold War with China and how it's raging right now, and it's time for people to wake up and see what's happening, and to use the power of peace-loving everyday people to stop this war in its tracks, because it's just too scary to even think of if this continues. Mm-hmm.
Yes, so we can see this as part of a hybrid war against China, manufacturing consent by demonizing Chinese both overseas in China and in the United States.
Yeah,
Uh,
yes, propaganda is the first step. Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Linda, how do people get in touch with you
Well, in touch with me.
or Code Pink?
Yeah, definitely. Code Pink has a working group specifically addressed to countering the Cold War with China. It's called China is Not Our Enemy. They do incredible work on DC, lobbying Congress and disrupting Congress. And we have chapters, in communities all across the U.S., starting to do their work. Here in Southeast Michigan and Ann Arbor, we now have a small but growing local chapter. And we plan to stay vigilant on this case. And you can find me through codepink.org. Mm-hmm.
Okay, codepink.org. And Bob, similar question to you. Right now it seems like we are in the full throes of a political witch hunt against Chinese and China. When I say witch hunt, I don't say that trivially. We know that in the past, not only during the McCarthy era, but in medieval Europe, there were massive witch hunts. In fact, if I have my history correct, the largest burning of witches in Germany, in Bamberg, was because people were accused of creating crop failure. So these charges of agro-terrorism are not trivial. I think they trigger some very ancient prejudices and fears in the population. They've certainly been effective. But I wanted to get your sense of, some things that people can do and how you see this situation developing.
Yeah, I would say that check out Code Pink's website, definitely. I think they're still collecting signatures for the petition to the regents and the university president. Um, I, I think the reason, well, another reason related to this whole prospect is I really see this as a continuation of the pivot to the Pacific that under Obama, but it's being kicked into overdrive, and it's also um, dare I say, I don't want to bash Trump, and I don't want to bash any particular political party, but um, this is kind of like a twofer for a certain group of people that want to pursue this narrative because they're going after academic freedom as well, and they're intimidating our universities and our schools and saying you have to toe the line and follow the narrative of power. And if our schools give in to this narrative, uh, we've lost another major bulwark against critical or in favor of critical thinking and the support of helping ordinary Americans understand their world. Um, we need our universities, and specifically the University of Michigan, to challenge these charges against these researchers. And we as citizens need to keep their names first and foremost in our minds and understand that it's not just this is not an isolated incident. And I'd also say, I mean, yes, under Obama we did the pivot to the Pacific, but if you're talking about history, um, the demonization of China has been going on since the Chinese Revolution succeeded, and it's really, again, it's heartbreaking to me because it's China was our ally during World War II, and they took the brunt of the Japanese army uh, as a sacrifice. They fought and sacrificed millions more than we did, just as Russia lost millions more than we did against the Germans. China was our ally, and China is still an important ally that we could seek to have good relations with to make a better world.
And yes, and I would absolutely agree with you. China is doing extraordinary things for the world, most certainly, for example, in the domain of green and sustainable energy development. It's actually showing the way forward for us as far as carbon neutral economy is concerned. But yes. So, and you also said, these are not isolated incidents. We know that this is an entire pattern and it affects the academy. Science is a collective endeavor. It's done across the world. You create an intellectual commons among or for humanity. And this certainly has a very deleterious effect on that. I'd like to ask Julie to make any final comments regarding, the future of China-US relations, what you see the implications of this being, and any things that you think that, the general public should be aware of.
But I think what we've been talking about is the persecution of and prosecution of Chinese scientists as a group is extremely dangerous and very self-destructive to American society as a whole. It's more dangerous than than finding two scientists in possession of a fungus material that has very low risk of harming crops in the United States, and that experts cannot justify the amount of resources that are being used to prosecute these Chinese scientists. It is still a larger picture of a propaganda framework that treats China as an enemy, can build a consensus to war, and by building up a group of identifiable individuals who are actively working to produce something good for this country. They bring their wisdom, their intelligence, their knowledge, and innovation to join the American community, and they come in good faith and to be treated as such is not just a great devastating experience for them, but for our entire community. And I just also want to say that there's so much said about China being trying to destroy our technology, trying to steal our technology. I mean, the days when U.S. technology superiority is the envy of the world is pretty much over, I think. And when United States technology is facing such consequences of their making of their own, I think you'd have to look at what's happening in China also. The Nature Index database showed that in 2025, 8 out of top 10 world universities in science and research ranking are Chinese universities. The world top university is Chinese Academy and Science, number one. Number two is Harvard. And Harvard is the only US university that ranks among the top 10. The other one is Germany. The rest of the 8 universities are in China. So China is doing great things. They're doing wonderful things for themselves, their people, and for the world. And for us to continue to push China to a corner and persecute its people and blame China for everything that we are responsible for is the most destructive thing that we can do to bring down our own country. And I'm very sad because I'm an immigrant to this country. When I first came in 1967, I was just overjoyed and happy to be free of the British colonial system, Hong Kong, from which I was born, into a country where I am now a true, I consider myself a first-class citizen instead of being a second-class colonial subject in England, in Hong Kong. But now we're facing the same things. There's a lot of despair among Chinese American community members to see what United States is doing. And we are more worried than anybody else. If there's a war that break out between the United States and China, what's going to happen to us? That's the question that people keep asking me. I have no answer, except I look back to the Japanese concentration camp experience during World War II. I look back at all the persecutions that went on following the World War II experience. And people are nervous, and it's not good to have a group of very contributing citizens in this country to be in that position at this time.
Yes. So we are facing some very, very dark clouds in the future. We have to make sure that there is no war, and I believe that actions that Code Pink and other organizations are doing are absolutely critical. I believe that war is not an option. I also believe that despair is not an option. Linda, one more time, you said that Code Pink can be reached. This is China is not our enemy at codepink.org. Is that correct?
That's correct. And I believe we're still taking signatures for the petition to the U of M Board of Regents and their interim president to speak up for these students.
Thank you. Thank you, Linda, for your great work. And thank you, Julie and Bob, as well.
Thank you, KJ.
KJ, thank you, Julie.
Thank you, Linda and John.
Xinjiang, an autonomous region of China, is often depicted in the Western press as a massive slave camp or the site of anti-ethnic cleansing comparable to that of the genocide in Gaza. It is actually a burgeoning region with a vibrant cultural life that hundreds of millions routinely visit annually, as this video of the 7th International Dance Festival attests to.